Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Grief Unedited. This is a space where we have real, honest and raw conversations about grief and loss. I'm your host, Karen Lafferty, and I'm an accredited counsellor specialising in grief, and I've worked with families and individuals for over a decade, helping them to navigate their journey of loss. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and both of those are at Continuum Counselling, or I'm also on www.continuumcounselling.com. I just wanted to acknowledge that this podcast is purely for educational purposes, and the views expressed are my own, so they don't represent any of the third parties that I work on behalf of or with. And lastly, I always give a bit of a content warning at the start of our episodes, and it's really just to acknowledge that grief is quite a raw emotion, and obviously for lots of people it can stir up lots of different feelings. Today's episode is slightly different, and I'll introduce that in a wee moment as to why it's slightly different. But just an acknowledgement, if there is anything in today's episode that feels difficult or triggering for you, then please do step away and look after yourself. Now, on today's episode, I've got the lovely Emma with me, and today we're talking about something a wee bit different to our usual grief conversations, because today's episode is called The Grief No One Talks About: Menopause and Women's Sense of Self. So Emma, do you want to start by introducing yourself, tell listeners a wee bit about your background and why we're having this conversation today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Karen. This is a huge topic. I'll explain a little bit about me and how we got to there. So my name's Emma McElhinney, and I am a perimenopause health coach. So I help women in their 40s and 50s, transform their lifestyle, their bodies, if that's a goal that they've got, reclaim their sense of self, which is what we're going to be talking a little bit about today. I've been doing this for nearly a decade, and I actually came into the coaching space after a gazillion years of wearing high heels in the corporate world. And it was actually a bit of an identity crisis of my own when I went back to work after having my son. And my body had changed, my attitude had changed, my confidence was in my boots. And it was through that journey of me reclaiming my sense of self through my health and my body and mindset that I'd done quite a lot with nutrition and exercise. And I was like, why is nobody talking about this stuff? Why? Like, this is like, and obviously childbirth is a huge time of change. And it was that I kind of went, well, if I can do this for myself, then I can help other people. And went down the route and got my nutritionist qualifications. I've since gone on and done postgrad in psychology and behavior change.
Amazing.
So, I come from health coaching from a place of we have to look at all the things that we're consuming, whether it is our food, but also what we're consuming emotionally, how we're moving our bodies and what we're thinking and how we're thinking. And that's why my business is called Team Eat Move Win, which is also my maiden name initials too. So kind of ties in quite nice. Yeah.
Nicely done.
Yeah, I know. I thought that. And then I was talking to you earlier, I was like, I'm now separated and I'm like debating, maybe go back to my actual maiden name initials. And then it's the same as my business name. It's perfect.
I love it when a plan comes together.
I know, it's like it was almost like it was in the stars.
Oh dear. I'm really excited for this conversation today, especially because I'm 39, so I'm kind of creeping into that perimenopause bracket as well. And it's something that I've kind of come as the generation where we've started to learn a bit more about menopause and the impact that it has on our body, because I don't think previous generations have had access to as much information or knowledge around it. So I'm really interested to find out, what your take is on this, Emma.
It is quite an interesting journey, because even when I first started in the health coaching space, I was working with a lot of women in their early 40s through to early 50s. And I would talk to a lot of women on the phone or on Messenger or whatever, and they'd tell me all these things. And I would say, it sounds like perimenopause. Now, this is before Davina got involved, Hail Davina. But it sounds like perimenopause. And people were saying, no, I'm too young. I've never heard of perimenopause. And that's just even in the last 5 years. So if you think about your mum, I don't know, older people, like even people my age, and I'm like 47, I think I'm 47. Like even when I was younger, people would talk about menopause like behind, it was all whispered, she's going through the change. much. Like
Mm.
it was all like behind closed doors. Nobody really spoke about it. And the perception of a menopausal woman was this like angry harridan that's sweating all the time, that's wrapping herself up in her cardigan. And like even now, like I've had people, prospective clients say to me, and who even are you to be talking about menopause and like that? I'm 47 years old.
Wow.
Like this
Mm-hmm.
affects,
Mm-hmm.
like it's not, it's menopause isn't a decision that you make. All women will go through menopause, whether they have 100 different symptoms or not. And I don't particularly love calling them symptoms either because it's not an illness, it's not a
Mm.
disease. It is just the natural part of the aging process. But it's how the decision comes with how we are going to deal with it. We can either, we can either suck it up and pretend it's not happening, just go on with things and struggle, or we could acknowledge and we can make decisions that actually, I'm not going to let this be the thing that defines me. I'm not going to let this thing floor me and actually take actions around it that is going to make this period in our life better. Because, the average age in the UK of a woman going through full menopause, and full menopause is literally one day of your life,
All
and
right.
it's
Okay.
12 months to the day from your last menstrual cycle.
Right.
That's menopause. Anything before that is perimenopause. Anything after that is postmenopause.
All
But
right. Okay. Didn't know that.
if you've got your average age of that, say like 54 in the UK, most women's hormones will start to fluctuate from about your age 38. Most women in the UK on average notice these symptoms age 42. So if
Right.
you've got age 42, you're starting to notice symptoms slash changes right through to 54. That's potentially 12 years
Mm.
that you're going, that's a big chunk of your life. And
Yeah.
it's this kind of notion that you have to put up and shut up. And I do not stand for that at all. Like we are all in control of all our actions and our thoughts, and it doesn't seem like it at times, but there's things that everybody can do to make that journey more enjoyable, more freeing, using it as a time of opportunity rather than, because we're going to talk a lot about this feeling of, oh, that's it, I'm done now. All the
Mm.
best years of my life are behind me. And it's not the case at all. Like, there's so much opportunity and so many like internal decision points that can completely change the game for a woman.
I think this is where for me, it's really interesting because I suppose usually when we talk about the sense of grief that, most of the episodes so far have focused around, one of the things that we talk about is like the loss of hope around any sort of restoration. It's like the person that we love has died, the relationship has
Mhm.
ended, there's no hope of it changing. Whereas with this, it feels like actually what we're starting to touch into is that there are things that women can be doing that actually potentially make the journey a wee bit gentler on themselves. So it's grief, but in a slightly different flavour, I suppose. It's just a different flavour of loss.
Yeah, and there's lots of different aspects to it. So you've got this like sense of loss for your youth and your youthful body and your face that is fairly smooth. I did a reel last week and I was putting my makeup on. I was like, I'm just going to record this. And I was like, does anybody else feel that their face is like structurally collapsing? But it's that kind of like you're grieving for your youth, but you don't, it's not really an accepted part. And like nobody
Mm,
really talks about it. Like a lot of women are like, well, I don't want to appear vain, but like, well,
mm,
actually, like this isn't being vain. This is acknowledging that you might look different. You might feel better. You might, like, when you get out of bed in the morning, you're like, oh, and you're actually beginning to recognize that you are getting older. And yes, it's a transition. Yes, it's different stages or different seasons of your life, but it's not a death knell. It's not a like you get to give up now. No, like there's
yeah.
so much to give. And there's all these different little nuances to it as well. Like a lot of women going through these hormonal changes have been in marriages for years and they might be acknowledging that actually, mm, is this what I still want? Is this still
Mm,
giving me what I need? They're in careers, their kids have got older, maybe gone to uni and they're going, oh, I could maybe do something different now. And it can be really quite confusing because you're like, well, what am I supposed to be doing? And
yeah.
there's no rule book for menopause. Like,
Yeah.
well, the email win is like you will do something. Um, but there's nothing to say that you have to stay in a career that you've been doing for the last 20 years and suck it up and just wait until you're drawing your pension. Like
Mm.
that used to maybe be what you had to do. You don't have to do that anymore. There's no rule that says you have to be in an unfulfilling relationship just because it's a done thing. There are things you can do to change it.
Mm.
And it's not always the case that like not everybody's like gonna ditch their partners or anything, but there's avenues to go down to, and there's loads of support out there. You can go and look to rekindle a relationship. There's so many different things that are happening. Like from a grief point of view, we've got parents aging,
Yeah.
dying, and that's probably like, and we have this whole like a lot of the women that I speak to do go through grief like that. And it's this, well, I knew it was coming, so I just kind of need to pull up my bootstraps and go on with life.
Yeah.
And there's just so many different plates to spin, to keep spinning. Um, there's just a lot.
I'm curious then from your experience, and I feel like this is going to be a yes answer, but like, to what extent is there a link then between menopause and confidence? And the reason I'm asking that is that one of the things I find often that isn't acknowledged in grief is a real sense of like a loss of confidence. So I'm just wondering, I'm thinking about those people you're talking about who are maybe navigating the loss of a parent, grieving the children that have now flown the nest and gone out into the world on their own. It's like if there's already a dip in terms of how we see ourselves, how we feel about ourselves when we're navigating menopause, and then we're also bereaved during that time,
Yeah.
I'm imagining
From
that might be quite catastrophic for someone.
Yeah, and it is if you think about like if you've had like your family around about you all your years and they've been there, they've been your support, they've been your nurturers, they're not there anymore. So you've got that
Mm,
element of, oh, I just want to feel like a child again. I just want somebody to look after me.
mm,
But then you've got the identity piece, and this is where one of the things that I talk about a lot is our identity, and I talk about how, your physical appearance, who you are in the world is part of your identity. One of the big things, especially the women that come to me are looking for, is because they don't like their physical representation of themselves anymore. They've maybe
yeah.
gained weight, like your elastin and collagen's depleting, so you're getting a bit saggy, your muscle mass is starting to deplete, so you don't feel as like, you just feel a bit like sad sack from the Raggy Dolls. Don't know if you'll remember the Raggy
I
Dolls.
do. I love
Um,
the raggy dolls.
but that's a lot of that whole, oh, I shouldn't be this vain. And it's not vain, it's just that
Mm,
your physical identity has changed. And
yeah.
that's like your identity and who you are is how you turn up for the world. So if you don't
Mm,
like that and you don't change it, that's a knock on confidence as well, because it's like this whole, like if you don't know who you are, you don't like what you look like, that's going to then have an impact on, how you're showing up for yourself, which is the experience that I went through
yeah.
after I'd had my son. Like I was like, I'm quite ballsy, I'm quite in your face, I'm quite confident. I went back to work after having my son. I was like a meek little mouse,
Wow.
like who even is she? I wasn't standing up for my team. I wasn't challenging my stakeholders. I wasn't being a particularly nice wife. I was like, and I was just like, something has to change here. And for me at
Mm,
that point, I was like, well, if I can focus on getting fit and getting strong again and getting my body back to something that I at least find attractive. And it was all of those things, working on the identity piece. Who do I actually want to be? How do I want to be showing up for myself? And then all the physical changes that happened. And I came back full circle. And it was that experience that made me twig of, well, actually, I was on a weight loss journey. Sounds really
mm,
simple, like a lot of women are after they have a baby. And I did all the diets. I did your Slimming World. I gained 7 pounds in a week on Slimming World because they told me I could eat all I wanted, pasta and potatoes. So I did.
never understood
Anyway,
that.
and it
Mm,
was at that point I was like, well, actually, this whole physical change can only work long term if we change what we're thinking and how we're thinking. And that's where the all the mindset work comes from.
mm,
Um, And that's the identity stuff that we go through with our clients as to, well, actually, this is only going to work long term if you change this. And if you can't see me, I'm pointing at my brain. But like from a confidence point of view, if you think about, for a lot of women, it can feel relentless as well. Like, you might be, your kids are grown up, they're getting teenagery and a little bit,
mm,
your parents are getting older, you might be getting a little bit worried. You're starting to feel more tired. You're starting to notice all these changes. All of that combined, you're just like, wake up one day and you don't even recognize who you are, or you don't, a lot of people are just like, I don't even like who I'm becoming. I just feel like I'm crab it all the time and I'm tired all the time and I'm leaving like my car keys in the fridge and
Yeah.
for a long time, like people talking more openly about it now, but I speak to women that are actually really fearful that they early doing because they were grateful for a car keys or ended up fortunate my house key cut because I couldn't find them. And then I found them. They're just like, oh. So for a lot of people, it was a really confusing time of all of these different things that are happening. It was really hard to try and, just recognize that this is meant, well, it's not meant to happen, but these things do happen to a woman's body and to our tiredness levels and whatnot, but we can change it. Like we don't
Mm,
have to be shattered all the time. We don't have to have the brain fog because there are things that we can do
yeah.
to overturn that.
It strikes me as well though there's such a power in like when women come together and women talk about it, because I think that's one of the things that I suppose doubles over with grief as well. Do you know that we don't talk about what we're experiencing, and when we're navigating that feeling of loss, even if it's purely because of menopause, if there's no actual like kind of grief in terms of
Mhm.
death losses around, if we're not talking about it, if we don't have that kind of sisterhood of people around us, whether it's, people older than us, younger than us, having those conversations about how we feel and where that loss is showing up in our life, then that's when you end up feeling isolated. It's when you think you're the only person going through that as
Yeah.
well.
And I think that's really common, and we've got to be careful. And I see it quite a lot that, oh, I've got all of these things going on and my hormones. And it's easy to blame our hormones and not do anything about it
Mm,
and stay in that place where you become, I don't want to say negative, but you become almost stuck in this cycle of starting to believe that you can't do anything about it. You
you just
can't,
have to take it.
you just have to keep sucking it up. And there's got like that, and there will always be groups of people that won't accept that they've got more control than what they think. And that, like, I'm not going to change that just by a single podcast episode. Um, but it's recognizing that, here's a good example, right? I spoke to somebody who did become a client and they had been experiencing brain fog and the mid-afternoon slumps, and like they were like, I have to actually go for a sleep now in the afternoon or when I come home from work because I just can't cope otherwise. I'm bloated all the time, I'm grumpy all the time, I'm angry all the time. And they'd gone to the doctors, they got the HRT, nothing really changed for them.
Okay.
And it wasn't until like I did two things with her in the first week. I got her drinking more water and I got her going outside for a walk every day.
Mm,
The bloating went away because she was actually hydrated. The brain fog went away because she wasn't dehydrated. Like, so there's simple things that, and I've got a podcast episode where I say, before you blame your hormones, try this
mm,
and
mhm.
look at, and people are often like going, I feel amazing. You're like, you've drank 2 liters of water. And there's a reason why, like, see when I talk to people and it's drink more water and people roll their eyes at nutritionists when they say drink more water. But it's like even just being a little bit dehydrated affects your mood, it affects your performance, physical and mental. And that was just in a space of a week. That woman had been suffering for years.
Oh, wow.
And that was in the space of a week because she could feel some change and she had a little bit more hope. There was just a little bit hope that going, actually, I don't
Mhm.
have to feel this shit all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and that like from a grief point of view, if you've been somebody that's been active and you know you thrive on energy and then suddenly you don't have that, like you're like, where's my younger, vibrant version of myself gone? Just feel like this old lady.
I suppose that's another beautiful parallel as well in terms of like the journey between menopause and the journey through grief as well, is that often people come to me at the point because they're thinking they just have to keep going with grief, that there's nothing they can do, that they just have to be sad for however long they're sad for. And it's like,
Yeah.
I find myself quite often talking to my clients about that meme that does the round every now and again about how we're basically just houseplants with complicated emotions. And it's like, I can help you. I can help you to figure out what you need. but we need to check off the basics, the non-negotiables. So like, are you getting enough sleep? Are you drinking enough water? Are you eating 3 meals a day that are some way balanced? You know, it's like, what's your exercise like? And again, you get
Mhm.
the eye roll of people going, oh, for God's sake, I paid all this money and I'm getting told to, you know,
I
move more
know.
and drink a bit of water. And it's like, but if we don't get the fundamentals right, then how on earth are we supposed to tackle the complicated bits of it, you know?
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And you know, that's why, like, from a diet culture point of view, like people are so attracted to things like fasting and injections now because it's like, well, it means I don't have to do that
I
stuff.
don't need to do the work.
And it's the boring stuff that it's the boring, mundane stuff that works.
Yeah.
Like if you go to the gym and you're in week 5 of a 12-week workout plan, it's not exciting and sexy. You've done it like 5 times already, and but that's the stuff that's going to grow the reps are going to grow the muscle. That's what we want. It's the same as the brain. The brain is a muscle. Like we've got to do the reps in
Yeah.
order to get the results. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it's like just boring. But that's what ends up getting the best results.
Yeah.
And it'll
Yeah.
be the same for you as well. Like, yeah, you maybe have to journal a bit. You maybe have to think about hard things. You maybe have to remember, like, and that's the hard stuff. There's no, like, I do actually have a magic wand in my pen pot, but we're not magicians. Like, we don't go in and go, da 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 da. I've changed your lifestyle and I've changed what you think and I've changed what you believe to be true about yourself. I don't get to do that in isolation. It takes the individual to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to me a wee bit, Emma, about because I know, like, obviously with the breadth of clients that you work with, I know that loss comes into your conversations quite often. So, talk to me a wee bit about how that shows up in your sessions. Like, what are you hearing from your clients? Do you call them clients? I don't know what you call your
Yeah,
patients.
clients,
Clients.
uh-huh. I think for the most part, it's this. So most of them, I would say like 90% of people that are experiencing bereavement, they all have their own families. And there's this kind of element of we know, like, and I suppose this is a sweeping generalization about women, I suppose, but we know we should be looking after ourselves, but we still default to being the carer and making sure that everybody else is
Mm.
okay. And your grief feels like a luxury. Like, oh, well, I can't spend too much time dwelling on it because I've got to get him to football and I've got to make all the dinners and all the rest of it. And I think there's an element of, I don't want to say like traditional, like women in their 40s are going to lose a parent, but when the parents have got old and they've had a lovely life and it's, you know, it's coming at some stage,
Yeah.
people are surprised at how consuming it is,
Yeah.
like really surprised. They're like, well, it's not as if like they hadn't been unwell for years, and it's not as if they weren't 85,
Mm.
but I'm just really surprised at how it's affected me.
Mm.
Um, and I think a lot of women, I don't think they necessarily struggle to talk about it, but they struggle to talk about how deeply it's affected them.
Mm.
It's difficult to talk about, you know, how much that person meant to them. Because it's your parent, like for example. So yeah, of course they meant something to you. Everybody knows that. But when you start digging into it, it's like everybody's unique. Everybody's got their own unique relationship with their person that's passed. And that's the level of detail I don't hear people talking about.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
what like the funny stories or yeah. And
Yeah.
it is a tough one because it's hard then to focus on yourself when we hear the memes like you can't pour for an empty cup and da 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 da, oh, an oxygen mask. And for a lot of my clients, they tend to be um and I say this in the nicest possible world, they tend to be quite control freaks in their life.
Right.
Like
Okay.
they're used to having multiple responsibilities. They're used to doing things and just going, well, I'll just be quicker doing it myself. And
Mm.
I speak to that quite freely because I'm like that as well. Like I'm very much a, well, I have to do it. Nobody else can do this as good as I can type person. Um, so when it comes to like, oh, I'm really grieving, it's not being able to allow somebody else to step in and help.
Yeah.
Like, I just have to do it myself. And it's that type of those behaviors that keep adding and adding and adding until it's a point of, oh my God, I need to stop or something needs to stop.
Yeah.
And I think that frightens a lot of people because they're not used to being halted in their tracks by anything.
Mm.
Because they're used to managing all the things and dealing with all the things. And then when it's something that's so deep and personal, it can be quite hard to like take a step back and, how am I supposed to grieve? And like you'll know there's no one size fits all. Like, so yeah.
Yeah. It strikes me there's so many layers to this because it's like there's the grief that we experience in terms of like our own sense of self and who we are in the world and how we see ourselves. And then we've also got that other layer of like actually when somebody is navigating a menopause journey as well as then being bereaved of somebody that they've loved
Mhm.
and then they're trying to, you know, just navigate those two worlds. And I suppose
Mhm.
coming into our conversation today, maybe what I hadn't appreciated was just how many parallels there are between the menopause journey and a grief journey, and that,
Mhm.
there's that real sense of like loss of control and it being something that we just have to go on with, that there isn't anything we can do about it. It's just the
Yeah.
result of a natural process, which both of them are. But I think what we're both saying from our kind of prospective angles is like, but my God, there's so much that you can do that
No.
just eases that journey in different ways if we're aware of the sports that are out there, and aware of like the permission to do something to look after yourself
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, and I think there's another thing to consider is, with like from a science point of view, with all the various fluctuations in our hormones, like our actual how we portray our emotions changes as well. And like a real life example of this was last year. Me and my husband separated, and in very close succession, a lot of really shitty things happened. I hope I can swear. But one of my cats died,
Mm.
and oh my goodness me, like I've grown up with pets all my life, with pets die, pets get put down, pets get run over by cars, all the things. I don't think I have cried as much at that as anything else in my life.
Yeah.
And I was really confused. And I was like, because I'm not a stoic person, I'm quite an emotional person, but I've learned to embrace that rather than shy away from it. Um, and even like my son and my ex-husband were like, "Are you okay?" Like, no. But I think there's that element of, so many other shitty things had happened
Mhm.
that a lot of it builds up and builds up and builds up, and then there's just one thing that
That
opens
outlet.
the dam.
Yeah.
And that can be quite scary when you're used to moderating your emotions and used to moderating your behaviors, and then suddenly you can't.
Yeah.
You're like, oh. And then
Mm.
that plays into this whole, nobody wants to be the stereotypical old-fashioned menopause woman that's crab it in mid swings and like hot sweats and all the rest of it. So when the emotions come out, you're like, oh my God, people are going to think I'm mental.
Mm.
So that whole element as well to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. And the shame that we can feel when we can't just put a pin in things, and I often find myself saying to people that we can't set our watch for grief, we don't get any forewarning that rush of emotions is coming. Sometimes you're in the middle of Morrison's crying into the cabbages because something's set you off in that space. So it's like if we can embrace it, if we can take that as being, this is going to be part of the journey, that,
I
we just
know,
need to hold space for those emotions when they do show up and not just keep shoving them down and carrying on all the time.
I know. I actually had an emotional mental breakdown in Dunelm Mill,
Yeah.
which was kind of awkward, that way, like, what are you, get out of here, Emma!
Mm. Often I'm laughing because the number of times I hear that from people where they're like, "You'll never believe what's happened," or "You'll never guess where I was," and it's like, yeah, because we
I
don't give
know,
it the space that it needs when we've got the time. So,
I
if we
know.
don't do that, it just leaks out somewhere else.
I know. And like last year, I was working with a therapist, and she was very much like, sometimes you just have to feel it, and
Yeah.
it's going to feel horrible, and it's going to feel like a gut punch, and it's going to feel, that you're never going to feel normal again. But you
Mm.
have to go through all of those experiences in order to, like, yeah, and it's not going to go away. Like, you might be fine for 6 months, and then all of a sudden, boom, something hits you, and you'll be in the car, and a song will come on, and like, the tears will come. And like I don't think I had truly appreciated, like I don't know if this is a Scottish thing or just a personality type thing, but I've always been used to like just get on with things and pull up your bootstraps, and it wasn't until you get that permission to say you don't have to keep doing that.
Yeah,
Like
it does need to
just
look
feel
like
it.
that. Hmm.
Just feel it. Write it down if it helps. If you can describe it, write it down. Um, so yeah. It's that kind of, well, actually, when you're grieving for your lost youth or your, I wrote a post about this the other day. It's like, yeah, your marriage might be dull. You might be resentful that you didn't do all of those things that you said you were going to do in your 40s, and you look back and you're like, what have I actually done?
Mm.
I'm not Prime Minister, or I've not like crocheted. I can see this toy that I started crocheting for my child when he was a baby, and it's still sitting half done up there. Um, but
It's
all
his
the
18th
things that you
birthday
thought you
present.
were going to do that you don't do.
Mm.
And it's kind of like, well, actually, like there's this whole feeling of I don't particularly love the phrase midlife. It makes me feel a bit icky, like, oh.
Mm.
But you're halfway through,
Mm-hmm.
but you get to choose like what
Mm.
you're going to do with the next half. Like, are you going to
Mm.
grab it by the balls and actually just do it? And
Mm.
that's what I go for. Like, that's the whole, like, we are not here to accept this kind of midlife mediocrity that some people do. No, we've
Mm.
got so much opportunity. And I can't remember the stat. There's a fascinating fact that a huge percentage of women that set up their own businesses do it in their 40s.
Ah, amazing. Mm-hmm.
And it's because it's like, well, actually, it's a bit of a light bulb moment of
Yep.
I've always wanted to do that, so I'm going to go and do that.
Mm-hmm.
But because we get so caught up in life, there's so much fear about change, like our brains don't want us to change. And that's why so many people get stuck
Mm.
because it's just like, oh, and like you'll know, like your brain just wants you where it is just now because you're not dead, you're fine, you're
Yep.
fine, stay where you are. And it's, for me, like part of my job is like helping people, pull off that plaster. Like a coach's job is helping people achieve things they've not done before.
Yeah.
But you've got to help yourself to get to that point
Mm.
and start. Yeah.
What would be what would be your key kind of advice, takeaways for somebody like me, I suppose, that's kind of just
Drink
getting
water.
in? Drink more water. What should I be doing to make sure that as I approach that kind of stage of life, I make it as gentle on myself as I possibly can?
Oh, there's so many tactical things that you can do, like in terms of nutrition. Like nutrition is your number one toolkit for managing menopause. If you think about hormones secreted in the gut, right? So your nutrition is the number one thing that you've got for your health and your movement and what you're consuming. So like if you're listening to murder podcasts all the time, then that's potentially not the best thing. Like, like I've actually had to stop listening to true crime podcasts. I was like, I don't think this is doing me any good. Like,
See the number of people that I've spoken to just in the last few months who are like absolutely invested in true crime podcasts. I'm just like, there's a whole generation of folk out there that are well
Uh,
equipped to make a
they're
bit of
actually all
murder.
psychopaths. I think all of us are psychopaths. But anyway, so like what you're consuming, whether that is like what you're consuming food-wise or what you're consuming in social media. Like I don't watch the news anymore. I
Mm.
can't, it's too easy to then have such a negative outlook on life because that's what you're being fed. Like that's what your brain is seeing. So things like that, tactical things that you can do, getting outside and walking and all the rest of it. But see at a deeper level, start deciding who you want to be. Like,
Mm.
start deciding, am I going to be the granny that's stuck on the chair that can't get up and make her own cup of tea and can't put her shopping away and needs to rely on a mobility something? Or do I want to be the granny that's down in the rug playing with the cars or kicking a football about? Like, you get to decide. And when you can make that decision internally, that's when the actual tactical things become easier because you know the path. Yeah, it's
Mm.
not an easy path. Like that's why coaches like me exist because we like teach people how to do it and make it easy as possible. But it's that kind of internal decision of I'm not going to be that old menopausal lady with the mid swings wearing the tweed skirt. I might wear a cardigan because I do love a cardigan, but I'm not going to be the person that allows these hormones to take over our life. I'm going to do everything that I can to have the easiest menopause and midlife as possible and be that active, fit old lady that's going up hills and mountains and, all of these kind of things. And that's a decision and that's a very personal decision for a lot of people.
I have got a friend who is a really dear friend, and she is super woo-woo. Like, she's into all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and I love her because she's just got such a different outlook in life to most of the people in my world. And she has always talked about her menopause journey as being like her second spring, and
Hmm.
she will talk quite openly about like having a year of her life where she just really invested in herself and really did everything she could to support herself through that year. And then like there's this different version of her at the end of it that,
Hmm.
almost is like, and without sounding like all happy clappy, but it was like almost like a rebirth of like who
Yeah.
she was in the world and how she saw herself. And it's just something that for me was always something that I've held in the back of my head has been quite inspiring, because up until then, everybody else that I'd spoken to had all these horrific tales of night sweats and brain fog and wanting to kill their husbands and all the rest of it, that it just sounded like such a horrendous journey. And then
Hmm.
one conversation suddenly made me go, ah, right, okay, so this can be something different. And I don't
A
know how much
really,
of that's just her attitude, but
well, it can be a really powerful thing. And, one of the big objections I get from people, I suppose, is because a lot of people just assume that I will help them lose weight by a meal plan and an exercise workout, right?
mm,
And they think they have to invest all this time and energy. So therefore, it's never the right time because they're too busy, right? So you're never going to have a woman in her 40s and 50s is never going to have a quiet life, right? We're all busy. We've all got many things going on. So many people will just say, it's not the right time, it's not the right time. And this whole, like, the right time isn't a feeling, it's a decision, right? You decide whether it's the time or not. And that's what your friend did. And
yeah.
if you can make that decision going, yeah, I'm busy. Yeah, I'm navigating a house. And yeah, I've got hormone changes. But if I want to be that person that I've decided I'm going to be, then I have to invest time and energy in myself. Like,
Mm,
we're not saying that you have to go to the gym 15 times in a week. We're not saying you have to spend 5 hours meal prepping or eating kale. I hate kale. Oh, um, like you still can drink wine. You can still eat crisps. You can still go out for meals. You can still do the things that
yeah.
you assume you can't.
Mm,
And this a lot of people are like, oh, the mindset stuff scares me. Like, well, it's not scary. It's actually quite easy when you know what to do, and that's what I do is teach you what to do. Um, but that's so refreshing to hear because I would much rather somebody said, right, I want to be X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to do the stuff that's going to get there. And it's
mm,
like at times it's not pretty, at times it's gnarly, at times you might actually go, I actually don't like that old version of myself anymore.
mm,
That's not who
yeah.
I want to be. Um, and it's like there's a whole other aspect to it as well, which I don't know if we'll get time for, but I'm going to dig into anyway.
Go
And
for it.
it's about this whole notion of the vanity thing. Like, well, and I'm seeing it quite a lot just now. Like people are like, I feel embarrassed to tell you that I want to lose weight. You know like that? Why?
Ah, okay.
Why? Oh, because online it's not acceptable to want to lose weight. I'm like that. Well, it is. Like, oh, I just want to get healthier. Like, it's okay to want to lose weight for vanity reasons as well. Like, I
It's
know,
almost like are we talking there about like the kind of body positivity movement almost of that's kind of become toxic in a way, I guess, that
yeah,
people are then feeling like they can't
hmm,
want to change their body because we've got to just love it as
yeah,
it is.
uh-huh. And
Yeah.
yeah, the like loving your body is hack all to do with what it looks like or what the numbers say in the scales or like what dress size it is. Loving your body actually comes from the inner work that you do.
Mm,
It's not like so. And I've had people come to me and say that they feel ashamed for wanting to lose weight because it's not
mm,
the acceptable thing to do.
wow.
And like I call it fat loss shaming. So you get fat shaming, which is totally unacceptable, but fat loss shaming is equally unacceptable.
Mm,
And it's this kind of like call to arms of if you want something, you can get it. You can
mm,
try. You don't have to like conform to what whoever is telling you over here. If you want to do something, get help and do it.
yeah.
No, it's I think that a lot of people that decision can be quite hard because it's like, oh, I want to do something, but it's not the right time, or I'm too busy.
Yeah. It's that initial commitment, isn't it? It's like once you've made the commitment, once you've set your kind of compass in the direction you want to go, then the rest is decidedly easier, but it's actually making that commitment in the first place to pick
Yeah.
up the phone, to book an appointment, to,
Yeah,
and do something about it.
absolutely. Yeah, so that kind of went full circle.
Thank you for this, though, Emma, because I was really conscious coming into today's conversation that I knew it was going to be quite different to the other episodes that we've recorded, but also I suppose it hadn't occurred to me just how similar those two journeys of
Mm,
menopause and grief actually are in terms of the experience, but then also that space where those two things collide as well. And yeah,
yeah.
people are dealing with both menopause and,
Hmm.
loss through grief as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
I
it's been quite
think,
powerful.
like, for a lot of women, the connection, like menopause, most women are going to go through it, in their 40s and their 50s. A lot of people don't acknowledge or recognize or understand that it is a grieving process in its own
Mm-hmm.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can be woo woo, happy, joyous, oh, it's such an opportunity and it's a luxury to get older and, um, but acknowledging that it's okay to feel sad, that you miss your perky boobs or, you miss your flat stomach or you miss your face that isn't collapsing. Um, but yeah, it's this whole feeling of like, getting older is a privilege and it's
Mm-hmm.
inevitable, but being old is also a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and being able to reframe this period, yes, there's opportunities, but there's also opportunity where you can grieve for your younger self.
Yeah,
But, you get to have more if you so choose. Like your
amazing.
friend.
Yes, yes. Yeah, she's definitely sprinkled a bit of lightness into my experience and what I was expecting menopause to look like. So it's like, gosh, if that's
Mm.
the impact one person can have in telling you their narrative that's maybe quite different to what we see, on the
Yeah.
telly and whatever, then yeah, maybe it makes it a wee bit more hopeful for people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like I've had clients that are like, I've never felt this good in my own skin. I've never felt this active. I've never
Wow.
felt more as energized. I wish I'd done this in my 20s. I wish I'd done it in my 30s.
Amazing.
Um, so yeah, take control.
Emma, tell us where people can find you. Like if folk want to connect with you after this episode, where are you online?
I am on Facebook, just Emma McElhinney, McElhinney.
I like that you need
Um,
to think about
I
spelling
know,
that
honestly, it's like, oh my God, I've said that, spelled out that name so many times in my life. I'm on Instagram at Emma Perimeno Health. Had to think about that. It's quite a new account because I've actually got two businesses. So I've got the Perimenopause Health Instagram, or you can find me on my website at teamemw.com.
Amazing. And we'll link to all of those in the show notes as well. So if anybody
Fab.
is listening and found that helpful and wants to connect with Emma, then we can obviously hook you up in that way. The last thing I want to just say just before we wind up today's episode is if you have found it helpful, if there's been something in this that you think would be of benefit to somebody you love, one of your pals, then by all means, please do share it. The easiest way to keep up to date with any new episodes is to hit subscribe, and that way you'll get a notification every time we release a new episode. And lastly, just to say that you can connect with me on Facebook and Instagram. Both of those are at Continuum Counselling, or on my website, which is www.continuumcounselling.com. So, Emma, thanks again for today. This has been a lovely conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for your wisdom as
Thank you
well.
for having me.
And yeah, until next time.
See you later.
Bye.